Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to be starting off our short kind of conversation. I say short, it's going to be a few weeks, but short in the sense that it's not going to be the entirety of our course. Our short conversation about the structure of the art market. Now, interestingly, I got into three different arguments, I would call them arguments, on this topic. And I'm sitting in Flux Factory's gallery, which is why I have this light shining down in my face. So I was talking to three different people that work in the arts industry, and all of them seemed kind of confused why I would start off by having this conversation with you guys, or why it's necessary. And well, I think I already gave you a good enough explanation of it, but just the mere fact that I got into like heated conversations about the market's presence in artistic practice leads me to believe that this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's one that needs to be had in this specific structure. I am in no way telling you that you all need to get gallery representation. I hope that has come across. I am in no way telling you that you need to get the kind of gallery representation that was represented by our walkthrough of the Chelsea gallery system, because that is also not the case. The reason that I'm having this conversation with you is because we're starting off with a conversation on money, and we're drifting away from that to try and actually, my hope is to end in talking about the way that we value artworks that is not relative to the exchange value of the work, or in other words, the money associated with that work. So I kind of blabbered on a little bit about the commodity phase, but we're going to get into that stuff more earnestly later on in the semester. But today I thought it would be a good jumping off point to talk about, well, this illustration here, which is a general structure of the art market. There are several of these flowcharts around. This one, I think, presents things in an interesting, very level-headed way. It's also one that can be translated to fit different art markets, because, as I was saying last week, the one art market that is often privileged in conversations or the arguments that I had is the one of the white cubes, of the Hauser and Wirth, of the Gagosian, the David Werner, that set. There's a lot of other different opportunities to look at an art world that doesn't actually encounter that at all. And generally speaking, you can translate a lot of the terms that appear in this chart to those varied different systems. So starting off, we have the artist as producer, all of you as producer. So I will often, and have often since you've met me, go back and forth between referring to people as artists or cultural producers. I often refer to artistic practice. I always talk about artistic practice. So the artist is producer, and then you have the critic, which gets its own bubble, dealer, gallerist, auction house, museum curators. These lines blur quite often, but they're kind of broken down with job descriptions. If you were to translate this into, say, folk art, you would still be engaging with these same systems. There are still galleries, there are still dealers, there are still critics, there are still museums. So if you were to translate this into, well, I mean, we're talking specifically about artistic production, so it's hard to break out of that. And then we have financial institutions, corporate consultants, private foundations. I mean, have a look through this chart to see, we're having a look through this chart right now, and you're probably looking at it while I'm talking to you, right? You can do two things at once. So this chart really interestingly sums up what is often regarded by people as a mess. You know, one of the terms that came up a few times in my conversation with these people, these artists and curators, was that it's a mess. It's a mess. Well, actually, it's not that much of a mess. It's pretty ordered. It's pretty regimented. We know how it works. We know how it operates. which was one of the person's arguments, that this is well-worn territory and not worth a conversation. I want to just get through this conversation so that we never have to have it again, right? So, today specifically, we're going to be talking about the auction house. The auction house, it proves to be a really interesting example for how the market structure weighs into artistic production. Today is not going to be a very long lecture on my part. This course is still designed as a seminar, so I'm going to be lecturing a little bit today and then opening it up for show and tell by the end of the week. The auction house, there's a few reasons why I want to talk about the auction house. One, most importantly, in Jean Baudrillard's The Political Economy of the Sign, he talks about the art world, and he talks specifically about the auction house as being a locus or a very important moment in the conversation about valuation, specifically monetary valuation, but cultural valuation as well, with regard to fine art practice. The second is that my graduate degree was certified by the auction house that appears on this, one of the two auction houses that appear on this slide, Christie's Education. My graduate degree did not come from the auction house. I am not an auctioneer. I worked for the auction house, but only as like a security guard. I have no interest in working at the auction house. I don't particularly like them that much, but I do think that given Baudrillard's example, which I'm going to go through in a second, they prove a very interesting location with regard to monetary valuation in the art world. So, in this slide we have the two major auction houses. There are actually three major auction houses, Phillips being the third. We have Christie's, Sotheby's, both of whom have branches around the world at this point. And Phillips, which doesn't have branches around the world, but Phillips presents an interesting example in the structure of auction houses. And that is the final reason why I want to talk about auction houses. They sell everything. They sell wine, they sell homes, they sell clothing. They have these things called house sales, which look like yard sales. It's kind of surprising that in 1 month they would have a Van Gogh work that has an auction estimate of about $80 million. And then the next month they'll sell a piece of silver for $100. It's not even, just like stuff, like basically garbage, like this cup. If I were to die, this cup might be auctioned at my estate sale. So, the reason why what was I going to say there? If you look at the fact that they sell everything, and then you want to have a conversation about the sanctity of art, it's a really tricky thing to do, right? You can't be the same building and sell something and value something very quickly, very immediately, according to this very rigid structure of cost analysis, and then in the next month have a conversation about, well, this is worth X amount of dollars because it's important. This is worth X amount of dollars because the artist is interesting. This is worth whatever because a museum has one or several examples of this. And so even though there's this veil surrounding the sale of art, specifically in art galleries and in the private sphere, when you're in the auction house, it actually has to come down to some baseline. There has to be some rubric or quantifiable system for establishing these prices. Now, the textbook that I hope is on order for all of you, because by next week you do have an assigned chapter reading out of it, is going to deal a lot with this conversation, but it's going to root the discussion in commercial gallery spaces, not in auction houses. Auction houses set prices differently. it is much more of a statistical analysis when it comes to pricing the work, and it has a little bit less to do with emotional value or any of the variety of things that Velthuis is going to go through in his book, Talking Prices, for us. So I am going to briefly read you something from Mr. Baudrillard. So in his introduction to the art auction, sign exchange, and sumptuary value, he says, in consumption generally, economic exchange value, or money, is converted into sign exchange value, prestige, etc. But this operation is still sustained by the alibi of use value. You can still drink a bottle of wine. It might be worth $10,000 because they pulled it from the bottom of the ocean. It sank with the Titanic or something like that, which did actually happen, and a bottle of wine did sell for about $10,000 because of that. Or that was the pre-sale estimate. I don't know how much it actually went for. The use value is still there. So you can say that, this table is worth $100 because that guy just made it, but this table is worth $100,000 because a dead guy made it in some country in Europe 300 years ago, and he sent it to this family in Italy. You might know them, the Medicis. So that's why it's $100,000. It's use value is still tied in very explicitly there. By contrast, Baudrillard says, the auction of the work of art of the work of art has this notable characteristic: the economic exchange value, in the pure form of its general equivalent, money, is exchanged there for a pure sign, a painting. Now, talking about a painting as a pure sign, I'm of course referencing this kind of this kind of discourse. Sorry. It is pulled from our textbook from the summer, Art and Theory. This is obviously the illustration for Roland Barthes' Myth Today, which we covered, the conversation about sign, signifier, that kind of stuff. So this was what I showed you when I was explaining what that all means, and this is where we're at right now in our conversation. So the idea that at an auction, and this is, Baudrillard might hit me in the back of the head if he saw this illustration and say that I'm oversimplifying his work. I am to a point, but at that same point, sometimes it's important to simplify things. So you have the price, which is the exchange value, and that is the equivalent of the work of art with a meaning. So what Baudrillard is saying is that there is, when somebody pays money for something, they get one thing. And what I'm saying in this is breaking that apart and actually saying they're not just buying one thing. They're buying the thing plus its meaning. So the signified plus the signifier is what the end total sum is. And so when you walk into an auction house, and this is not how auction houses work, I'm not going to go into the structure because I think that is actually where the conversation can get to be tedious and kind of silly. But if you're buying something at an auction house and you raise your paddle and you say that you want the thing, you often want it because, generally speaking, you want it because of use value, and that's what he's bringing up. You need a table, and so you want to buy a really nice table that was owned by the Medicis, and you got $100,000. So great, you're going to buy that table. But when buying a work of art in this kind of system, you're not buying things specifically for their use value. You're not going to go to an auction house and buy a painting specifically because you want something nice to hang over your couch. You're going there because you understand that there is a cultural meaning associated with these things, and also that there is this kind of free signifier the free sign of money. It just kind of floats around. You can basically get better deals at auction houses on important works of art. Shady as it might sound, that's how it works. I digress. So when you raise your paddle for a painting, you're not just raising your paddle for the use value. You're raising the paddle because you are tapping into that specific quantified, the sign. You're buying the full sum. So when you raise your paddle and say, I'm going to spend $8 million on that Glenn Ligon painting, you're buying it not because it's just a painting. You're buying it because it's a Glenn Ligon painting from his early period when he's introducing the use of text in a very chaotic and hand-done way. So it's representative of his early work. It's X, Y, Z equals this. So quite simply put, you have the exchange value, which I have here just marked by $4 signs because money, 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 is to the work of art with the meaning. So that's why auction houses present this really interesting case study, and that's why they are entirely necessary, they are incredibly useful, and they are often the barometer for certain price fluctuations in the broader market. Now, the reason that that is the case is quite simply because, well, it's public record. When something is bought or sold at auction, there are only a few sales for which the actual, well, actually, no, the money all has to be reported. It's a public, it's a public sale, as in it's a sale in the presence of the public. That means that any public that wasn't in the room has access to that information. And so the list I showed you last week of the very expensive paintings from the Wikipedia, pardon me. From Wikipedia, we know all of those prices because they were sold through, more or less sold through auction houses. There are a few paintings on that list that are not sold through auction houses, but we have accurate records because they were released for whatever reason. Auction houses always have to release their information. And so when a thing is sold from one person to another, we know how much it was, which means that when that Glenn Ligon goes for $8 million, because it's old, we know that, okay, this is the rubric that we're going to establish as the gallerist in order to price that work. Now, when Veltius goes into talking prices, he references this idea that we in the art market look to the auction house as the standard for setting prices, and that's why. So that's why they're important as well. That's the gist of it. So, all right. So this is a video that I posted in our show and tell section, and I hope that all of you have watched it. The reason that I put it up there is to talk about the structure of the auction house as being universal. I just, in reading the Baudrillard quote, was referencing the fact that fine art has a different performance within the auction house. But auctions and the way that people use them are pretty universal. And so, personally speaking, there's a really easy way to say that galleries suck. You just kind of you can lambast a gallery really easily. But auction houses are actually the most disturbing portion of the fine art market, in my opinion. I've had a lot of interactions with them. I've had a lot of conversations with auctioneers and specialists and this kind of stuff. And it is a purely capitalistic structure. It is one that is designed for people to exchange things. That's it. That's why it's universal, because universally we want to exchange things, whether that be goods or goods for goods or goods for cash or cash for cash. It's all about exchange. And so in this video, I'm not a gamer. I have absolutely no idea what these people are saying. I don't know what they're even talking about. I think this is I know it's a computer game. I can tell by the graphics, but I don't know what it is, right? So some of you might, some of you might not. Whether you do, it's totally irrelevant, because what this very short video, it's just under 4 minutes, what this short video is going to deal with is, or what I'm using it to illustrate, is the fact that the rhetoric around auctions is almost always exactly the same, and they are not places where the full cultural esteem and the interwoven aspects of the discursive net around a work of art they're not part necessarily of the equation. They are part of the way that things are priced for certain. I mean, if we go back to this, without the signifier, the signified loses its momentum, and it therefore doesn't equal the price. So I'm not trying to contradict myself, but what I'm saying is that when people shop at an auction house, they understand why the price is set where it is, but they, sorry, something was happening off camera. They understand where the price is set, but they also understand how they want to buy things. And so this video is going to illustrate very nicely how that system works. And the fact that this rhetoric is developed by gamers for their kinds of culture is a sign that it is wholly ubiquitous. I mean, I know I'm more familiar with furniture auctions because that's where my parents used to buy a lot of their furniture. Not that they're buying high-priced furniture, but they like older things, and you can get an older chair for the same price you can get a new chair. You just have to go to a different store. And so an auction house is a type of store, but it's a different mode of selling things, right? So, watching this video, having this understanding of the way that anything can be sold, I want to end today by making a few categorical distinctions about what we're going to be dealing with in this course. If anything can be exchanged for money, right? Everything has an exchange value, sadly. Or maybe not sadly, we live in this world. These are the ways that people who study the art market have cordoned off artistic practice. They have these 4 categories, and I've also posted the link to the article that this comes from, which is about the structure of the art market. Definitely have a look at that article before we get into our conversation next week, because our conversation next week is where we're actually going to start looking at the similarities between art worlds. Veltius sets up a conversation between a traditional art world and the avant-garde art world. So we have the traditional galleries, avant-garde galleries. One of the other readings that we're going to break apart is going to deal with a Western art market versus a non-Western art market. And the text, that's Terry Smith's work. The text that this category comes from is the link that I've posted in Show and Tell, and that is a very, it's from an economist's perspective. It is not from within the art world, but there are moments where his conversation, where he gives us those facts. He says, he cites it as a limitation of his research, that he, in fact, is an economist and not someone who is on the inside. I don't see it as necessarily a limitation. I see it as a benefit. Veltius is an anthropologist, so he's working around the art world, but he's not necessarily working within it. People who work within the art world have a variety of different blinders on. They like certain kinds of art, but they don't privilege other kinds of art. They like certain gallery structures, they don't privilege other gallery structures. That kind of stuff I'm trying to eliminate by bringing in other thinkers and theorists to flesh this out and give you what I hope to be a much more even-keeled perspective on artistic production and how it interacts with capitalism. So the taxonomic categories that we're going to be covering, or that when I refer to a work of art, I could be referring to any of these things. They are items that have been recorded with some sort of recorder device, either sound or an image. They are the written word. They are performed on the live stage. These taxonomic things are actually partially the tools that are used to create these things. So you have like a recorder, a pencil, a stage, and then some sort of two-dimensional image display system. So those are the things that I'm categorizing as artwork when these things are the things that enter into the auction house system with a different meaning structure behind them. Even if you're buying a first edition of Mark Twain, you have the thing, which is a book. You have the meaning, which is that, you have the meaning. So you have the thing, which is the book. You have the meaning, which is that it's the first edition, and then you have the first edition book. Oh, check that out. It's a good little loop I just drew. And the same can be said for this kind of stuff. Because you have the book, because you have the first edition, you have the price. So these are all, these taxonomic records are all operate the same. And so, we had the conversation last term about the wider set of artistic production in today's day and age. All these different ideas can actually be played out as artistic practice. And so here, as we break down the market structure, I want to make sure to give you a very cohesive understanding of what I mean when I say a work of art or a work of art on the market. I mean any of these things. Now, that said, I am going to be privileging things that include this, things that include this, and things that include this. I'm not going to talk that much about textual work in this term because I'm just not. So that's it. We're going to cap it off at this half an hour. Watch that other video, look through that article, and I'm really looking forward to show and tell and also seeing some of your first assignments. I know that those are starting to come in, so I haven't looked at much over the weekend. So happy Monday, and here we go. Thanks.